Hello guys, welcome back to the quantity solving workshop and to another video. In today's video we are going to be treating how to measure for the blockwork for a frame structure. Now, unlike in the previous video when we treated our blockwork for a normal conventional building, this building is framed, meaning that it has what? Beams and columns. So the approach we are going to go about measuring for the blockwork here is quite different from the approach we used in the previous one where there was no column and we measured our blockwork directly. But in this case, the approach we are going to be using to measure for the blockwork will change. So in order to measure for this blockwork, for this drawing, we have to take into account the column placement. Like I said previously in our last video, the columns that are inside the foundation are the same as the columns that will be found on your ground floor. So in this drawing you can see that I have brought out all the columns with a red biro here. So this red biro that you are seeing here in this ground floor plan, those were the placement of the columns in the foundation. So you are still going to be seeing them on your ground floor. So after bringing this out, we can now use it to determine the total perimeter of our blockwork. Now remember, blockwork is measured in meters square. So we are going to be needing two parameters: the total perimeter of the blockwork, be it 230 mm blockwork or 150 mm blockwork, and then we need the height of the blockwork. That will give us the total area of our blockwork. Then we are now going to start doing our deductions for each of the openings that we have in the plan. So first things first, we need to determine the total perimeter of our blockwork, starting from the 230 mm blockwork as seen in this drawing. So first things first is the 230 mm blockwork. So in this drawing there are both 230 mm blockwork and 150 mm blockwork. So if you look at this in the dimension line here, you can see this 230 mm thickness of blockwork, and if you look at here, you can see that this is 150 mm thickness of blockwork. So we have to measure them separately because of procurement. The amount that they will sell 230 mm, which is 9 inches block, will be different from that they used to sell 6 inches block. That is why you separate them. Good. So now we are now going to start determining the length of our blockwork. Now to determine the length of our blockwork, we are going to be looking for the end-to-end dimension of each of the blockworks in between two columns. So as you can see now, this blockwork now will be laid in between these two columns that you are seeing here. So we need to determine the length. So now they've told us that from here to here is 3,778. So we know our first length from here to here, 3,778. So let me shade it so that it can be easy to notice. 3,778. And if you can look at this, the blockwork that we have here is the same thing as the blockwork we have under here. I don't know if you can see it here. So we are going to be multiplying it by 2, so we'll shade this part also. Right, so we measured for this blockwork here and this blockwork here, so we'll just record it. So the next blockwork we're going to be looking at now will be this blockwork here. This blockwork here. And they told us that the length of the blockwork is 4,000 from here to here, 4,363. So we'll now record. So what we have here is the same thing as what we have here. So we're going to be multiplying this by what? 2. So we'll record 4,363 multiplied by 2. So it means that we've booked for what? This and this. I hope that makes sense. So the next block work we're going to be looking at would be this block work here. Right, this block work that you're seeing here. So now how do we get the length of this block work? So if you look at the dimension, they've told us that to get to this point, to get the dimension from here to here, what we can do is that we can add these 3 dimensions together, this and this together. So 1200 plus 150 plus 3000 is going to give me what? 4350. So it means that the dimension from here to here is what? 4350. So we'll now what? We'll shade it to show that we are done with that. So we now what? Record 4350. So the next one we're going to be looking at will be what? These 2 block work here. So basically what we're doing is that we're trying to get the horizontal space before we get into the verticals. So we're going to determine what is the length of this block work here. So if you trace this, you can trace it to call out C, and similarly if you trace this, you can trace it to call out D. So they've told us that from call out C to this 3,943. So what you can now do now is to minus half of the thickness of this wall and half of the thickness of this wall from this side. It will give us the end-to-end dimension for the block work. So 3,943 minus 2 times 115 is going to give me 230. So minus 230 is equal to 3,713. So it means that from here to here is 3,713. But mind you, the block work we have here is the same thing as the block work running through here. So we are going to multiply what we have by 2. So we've cut out for this block work here. So we'll record So next on the list will be this wall over here. So how do we determine the length of this wall? As you can see, if you look at this dimension, they've given us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dimensions that will take us from the external side of this block work down to the external side of this block work. So if you add everything together, it will give us the dimension from here down to what? Here. So we have 212, which is this one, plus 900, that's plus 3 times 900, which will cut out for this and this, then plus 1121. We're going to be having what? 4033. So that 4033, we are going to be minusing half of the thickness of this column. I'm going to be minusing the remainder of this column here. You know that this column is what? 230 by 381. So from that 381, if we minus the thickness of the block work, the remainder of this column is what we're going to be minusing from 4033. So 4033 minus half of this column here, which is half of 230 is 115, then minus 381 minus 230, that is 151. So we're going to be minusing half of the blockwork here and 151 from this side. So we're going to be having 3,767. So the length of this blockwork from here to here is about 3,767. So we'll now shade it. And then we'll book 3,767. So the next blockwork that we're going to be looking at will be what this blockwork here. So we can now what book. So we know that the length from here to here is not given. However, they're giving us three multiple dimensions. This dimension, and what this dimension. So for this blockwork here, I think there's a little discrepancy in this dimension here. So we're going to be using the ground floor because they are the same thing. If you trace this is passing through call out C. This call out E is supposed to be passing through the middle, but for some reason it is outside, so we're going to be using this. So this is the blockwork that we're going to be seeing there. It's just that in the ground floor there's going to be an arc for the entrance. So what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be using the same dimension here. So 3,943, which is this, plus 637, which is this, plus 560, which is this. When you add everything together, you're going to be having 5,140. So you minus half of what the size of the column from the both sides. So half of 300 is 150 multiplied by two sides, that's 300. So minus 300, we're going to be having what 4,840. So we can now what book. So it means that the dimension for this blockwork here will be what 4,840. So the next one we're going to be looking at to be what the individual blockwork inside the what floor plan. So we're going to be looking at what this floor plan here horizontally. So if I do this, you can see this horizontal blockwork here. That's what we're going to be looking at. So they've told us that from the end-to-end dimension from here to here is 1,000. So if we add the thickness of the wall here, it will give us the length of this blockwork. So 1,000 plus 230 is going to become what 1,230. So it means that we've cut for this blockwork here. As what 1,230. So right. So the next one we're going to be looking at to be this blockwork here. This blockwork here. So how do we get the length of this blockwork? So we have to determine the length of this blockwork here. Right. What we're going to be doing now is that if you trace this, you can trace it to call out D. And if you can trace this other side, you can trace it to call out E. And they told us that from here to here is 1,351. So this 1,351, we need, it is the center dimension here, but we need this dimension to exceed to the edge of the blockwork. So we're going to be adding half of the what thickness of the blockwork, which is what 115. So we'll add 115 to 1,351. And that is 1,466, meaning that from here down to this edge of this blockwork here is 1,466. So what we're not doing now is that we're going to be minusing 230 for the thickness of this blockwork. Once you minus this thickness of this blockwork here, whatever we're left with will be the dimension from this edge of the column down to the edge of the blockwork. So minus 230, that is what 1,236, meaning that this blockwork here is 1,236. So now let's record. So the next dimension the next block work we're going to be looking at will be these 3 block work here, the horizontal ones. So now, how do we get the dimension for this block work? Now you can see that what they've told us that the end-to-end dimension is what 2,337. So it means that this block work here to this door, this block work here and this block work here are going to be what? The same thing. So whatever we have here, which is 2,337 multiplied by what? 3, to cater for this 3 block work here. So we'll now record that 2,337 into 3 places. Nice. Multiply by 3. So we've measured for these 3. So the next one we're going to be measuring for will be this small block work here, horizontally. And they told us that it is what? 1,211 in length. So we'll now book it. Let me show you it first. So 1,211. So the next block work we're going to be looking at. So the last 2 block work we're going to be dealing with horizontally for the 230 mm block work will be this block work here and this block work here. Now remember, this is 150 mm block work. We're going to deal with that separately. So what can we do to get the length of this block work here? They've told us that from this edge down to this edge is what? 1,200. So if we add 150 mm block work to it, that's going to give us what? 1,350. So it means that the length of this block work from here to here is 1,350. So we'll now record. So the last horizontal block work would be what? This block work here. So let me just increase this. So the last block work here will be this one, and they told us that the end-to-end dimension from this edge down to this edge is giving us what? 3,000 mm. So now record 3,000. So doing that, we've measured for all our horizontal block work for this drawing. So what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be getting the total for all the horizontal block works. So after doing all the arithmetics, we added everything together and we got a total length of 50,467 meters. So this is the total length of our 230 mm horizontal block work inside this plan. So the next one we're going to be looking for now will be the vertical block works in that plan. So to start with our verticals, we'll be starting with this block work here, and as you can see, they've not given us a dimension to look for this block work here. So what we're going to be doing now is that from the look of things, that is the same block work as what we have in this foundation at this side here. So if you add these 2 dimensions together, 1096 plus 944, that's 2040, meaning that from call out 1 down to this point here is 2040. So minus half the thickness of the column from both sides, and this column type 2 is 230 by 230, so minus half of 230 times 2, that's 230. So we're going to be having 1810. So it means that the dimension for this wall here is 1810, and what we have here is the same thing as what we have here, so we'll multiply it by 2. So that's basically the same thing that's going on in the ground floor. So you can see we have this one here, which we calculated as 1810, and similarly the same thing goes for this point here. So we'll now record 2 by 1810. let me just use blue arrow to demarcate this one. So the next one we're going to be looking at will be this small vertical here. So to calculate this smaller blockwork here, we're not giving any dimension to what calculate this. Remember that I just manually brought all these columns out, so they might not necessarily be what accurate. However, we can use the same blockwork as in the foundation to measure for some, because the blockwork we're going to be seeing in the foundation, some of them is going to what apply in this ground floor, like this one. Now you see this small blockwork here. This is the blockwork we have here. So as you can see, this is more accurate because it has been given in the drawing. So they told us that from this center line down to this point is 1096. So we're going to be minusing half of the length of the column from both sides. So 1096 minus what 230 is what 866, meaning that the dimension for this small wall here is 866. Then we multiply by 2 to cater for this one and what this one. The same thing applies here. This blockwork here is 866. We'll multiply it by what 2. So we've scattered for this one and what this one. So that's 2 by 866. So the next one we're going to be looking at to be this vertical blockwork here. So to determine the length of this vertical blockwork, we're going to be using the same thing in the what foundation. So you can see that this is the blockwork here, right? So they've told us that from here to here is what 2545, and this 452. So add them together. 2545 plus 500 plus 452 is going to give me what 2997. So minus half of the what length of the column from both sides, which is what 115 times 2, which is 230. So we're going to be having 2767. So we'll now what record. So it means that the length of this blockwork here from here to here is what 2767. So let me just put, this is the blockwork here. So the next blockwork we're going to be looking at will be this long vertical blockwork here. So in order to determine that, we're going to be what looking at this same drawing here. So this is the blockwork in the foundation. So we're going to be using this because this has most of the details for the dimensions to find this particular length of the blockwork. So if you look at this, they've given us 3 dimensions, this, and this. So if you add them together, 2545 plus 452 plus 1543 is going to give me what 4540, meaning that the dimension from here to here is 4540. So we'll now less half of the thickness of the column, which is 115 for 2 sides, so that's 230. So we're going to be having what 4310, meaning that the length of this blockwork here is 4310. And similarly, the same applies to this blockwork here. So this will be what 4310. So now let's record. So the next vertical blockwork we're going to be looking at will be this blockwork here and this blockwork here. So they are basically the same thing because they are on opposite sides. So now they've told us that the dimension from here to here is 1313, meaning that the length of this blockwork here is 1313, and similarly the same thing applies here, as you can see, given the dimension. So we're going to record 2 by 1313, and we've scattered for those two opposite small vertical blocks. So the next blockwork we're going to be looking at will be this blockwork here and this blockwork here, because they are on opposite sides and they are the same thing. So if you trace this line, you trace it to call out 2, and if you trace this line, you trace it to call out 3 prime. So as you can see, they've given us 2 dimensions to determine the distance from call out 2 to call out 3 prime, and that's this dimension and this dimension. So when you add it together, 3104 plus 687, you get 3791. So it means that from here to here is 3791. So we're not going to be minusing half of the thickness of the column from both sides. So that's minus 230, and this is having 3561. So this is the length of this blockwork here. So you multiply it by 2 to cater for this side also. So you now record 2 by 3561. So the next wall we're going to be looking at will be this wall here. So now, to determine the length of this wall, if you refer back to our ground floor, to our foundation drawing, you can see this is the blockwork here. So now if you trace this to call out 4, and if you trace this, we are giving 3 dimensions, this dimension, this dimension, and this dimension. So if you add everything together, you're going to be having 5327, meaning that from call out 4, which is from this center point down to this center point, you're going to be having 5327. So you minus half of the thickness of the column from both sides, so that's minus 230, and you're going to be having 5097, meaning that the length of this blockwork here is 5097. So we now record. So the length of that blockwork is the same as was the length of this blockwork here. So I can shade it. So the next blockwork I'm going to be looking at will be this blockwork here. So how do we determine the length of this blockwork? So this blockwork is not found in the foundation, so it's not kind of a load-bearing like structural blockwork. It's just a blockwork to change the design, like to give partitions to the rooms. So it is not in the foundation drawing. So you can determine the length of this blockwork from here. So if you trace this, you can see we have 230, then from here to here we have 1765, then from here to here we have another 230, from here to here we have 1845, and from here to here is 230. So now if you add all those parameters together, we're going to be having the length of this block. So 230, which is from here to here, 1765, which is the end-to-end dimension of the toilet. Then we'll add this 230, and then you can see that from here to here they're giving us as 1845, and then we'll add the last one, which is 230. So let's do the math. So we're going to be having 4300 as the length of this blockwork. So we've scattered for this one here as 4300. So with this we can now record 4300. So the next block work we're going to be looking at will be this block work here. So this block work was found in the foundation, so we can use the foundation to determine it, which is this block work here close to the staircase. So if you trace it, call out 4 and down to this point here, we can have that we're told that the length is 2075. So we're going to be minusing half of this column from both sides. So 2075 minus what? This is column type 1, which is 230 by what? 230. So half of 230 multiplied by 2 is what? 230. So we're going to be having 1845, meaning that the length of this wall is 1845. Similarly, in this case too, this wall will be what? 1845. So we can now what? Shade and record 1845. So the next block work we're going to be looking at will be this block work here. So it is a structural block work, so we can see it in our foundation. So now if you trace this and this, you can see we're given what? A center to center dimension of 1178. So if we minus half of the length, the thickness of this column from both sides, we're going to be having what? 948. So the length of this wall here is 948. Similarly, in the what? Ground floor plan. So this here is what? 948. So we're now going to what? Shade and what? Record 948. So the next block work we're going to be looking at will be this block work here at this bedroom area. So now it is also a structural block work, so we can see it in the what? Foundation, which is for this side here. So now if you trace this and you trace this, you can see we have 3 dimensions that's capable of giving us the distance. And if you add 2484 plus 768 plus 1178, you're going to be having what? 4430. So if you minus half of the column from both sides, you're going to be having what? 4200, meaning that the length of this block work here is 4200. And similarly, the same thing applies for the what? Ground floor plan. So here, this block work is 4200 mm. So now what? Record 4200. So the next block work we're going to be looking at would be this block work here and this block work here. So they are the same thing, the same size, and they are opposite each other. So what we're now going to do now is this. We know that from here to here is 1946. So we're going to be minusing what? The thickness of this block work, which is 230, and we're going to be having 1716, meaning that the length of this block work here is 1716. So 2 by 1716. So the next block work we're going to be looking at would be this block work here at the entrance porch, which is similar to that of the block work at this side. So we're told that from here to here is 1920. So we're going to be minusing half of the column here, which is CT1, 230 by 230, and half of the column here, CT5, which is 300 by 300. So 1920 minus half of 230 is what? 115. Then minus half of what? 300 is what? 150. And I'm going to be having what? 1655. Meaning that the length of this block work here is 1655. So we're multiplying it by what? 2. That's for here and here. Similarly, this block work here is 1655. The reason why we're doing this is because we are trying to assume that the whole area here is covered. Then after getting that, we're now going to deduct for this opening at this side. That is just the basic principle that we're following. So now we're now going to what? we're going to shade and what record. So that's 1655 multiplied by what? 2. So the next block work we're going to be looking at will be this block work here, and that's the structural block work, which is the same as this block work here. So now to get the length of this block work, we are given from column 4 to column 5 2 dimensions. That's 2075 plus what? 2484. We're going to be having what? 4559. So minus what? Half of the length of the column from both sides, which is minus 230. We're going to be having what? 4329, meaning that the length of this block work here is 4329. Similarly, it applies to this block work here. So now what's record 4329. So the last block work now vertically would be this block work here, and as you can see, this block work is opposite this block work. So we can see this block work that we've determined here as 1716. We can multiply it by what? 3, which is this, because they are the same thing. This block work, and this block work are all the same thing. They are the same length. So with this, we've measured for all our what? Vertical 230 mm block work. 230 mm block work. So what we'll now do now is we're going to get the total vertical block works, add everything together. So after adding everything together, we had 5134 linear meters for the total length of our vertical 230 mm block work. So now the next thing now we now need to do is determine the total perimeter, which is by adding the horizontal and vertical block work together. So we've gotten our horizontal as 50,467, and we've gotten our vertical as was 51,354. So we'll add them together. So total center line or perimeter will now be equals to what? 50,467 plus 51,354. And I'm going to be having a total of what? 101,821 millimeters. So this is the total perimeter of our 230 mm block work inside of our ground floor. So we now need to determine the length of our 150 mm block work. So to determine the length of our 150 mm block work, starting with the verticals, we are going to be starting with this block work here. So how do we determine the length of this block work? So they've told us that from here to here is 1,246, from here to here is 230, then from here to here is 472, from here to here is 750, and from here to here is 257. So what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be adding everything together. We'll minus the thickness of this 150 mm block work here, and then we'll minus the thickness of this 230 mm block work here. That will give us the length of this vertical 150 mm block work. So we'll record. So we'll calculate 1,246, which is this length, plus 230, which is the thickness of the block work here, then plus 472, plus 715, then plus 257. We're going to have 2,955. So we're going to be minusing this wall thickness and this wall thickness. So minus 230 and minus 150. We're going to be having what? 2,575. So it means that the length of this vertical wall here is 2,575. So we'll record. So the next vertical blockwork now we're going to be looking at is this blockwork here. So as you can see, this blockwork is starting from this edge down to the inside of the wall room, and they've given us that the dimension from here to here was 1,550. So it means that from this wall here is 1,550. So we'll now record 1,550. So doing that, we've recorded for all our vertical 150 mm block work. Do we have any other one? No. So we can now get the total. So 2,575 plus 1,550 is equal to what? 4,125. So the next thing now we're going to be looking at will be the horizontal block work. So for the horizontal, you can see at this side there is no need to do another math because they've already told us the dimension from here to here is 1,350, meaning that the length of this block work here is what? 1,350. So we'll record 1,350. Similarly, for this block work here, they told us that the length of this block work here is given as what? From here to here into in as 2,065. So we'll record 2,065. When you add everything together, 1,350 plus 2,065 is equal to what? 3,415. So now we'll now add the two of them together to get the total perimeter of our 150 mm block work. So the total center line will now become vertical plus horizontal. So 4,125 plus 3,415. We're going to be having 7,540. So this is the total length of our 150 mm block work inside the drawing. So we've started for all the walls in this plan. So next would be to determine the height of the wall. So to determine the height of the wall, if you look at this drawing here, you will see that this dimension here from the bottom of the oversized concrete down to the top of the suspended floor, they've given us a dimension of 3,150. But the length or the height of our blockwork would not reach that 3,150 because we have to remove the beam. So if you look at this caricature drawing here, you will see that I've brought it out so that it can be easily understood. So let's just see, this is the top of the oversized concrete, that's the German floor, and this is the top of the beam, and they told us that the dimension is what? 3,150, as you can see here. So let's just say that this is our beam. So the beam and the oversized the beam and the suspended floor will be casted together. So the height of this beam will be what? 415 mm. So now we need to determine what is the length, which is A, from the top of this column down to the bottom of the column, which is the height at which the blockwork will be laid. So what we'll now do is this: we'll have to minus 450 from 3,150, and that will give us the height of the wall. To determine the height of the blockwork, so we know that the height is what? 3,150. So now let's what? The beam, which is what? 450 mm. So when you minus that, you're going to be having 2,700. So 2,700 is the height of what? Our wall. Meaning that from this end down to this end is what? 2,700. So now what we're not going to do now is this: we're not going to measure, since we know that the units for measuring blockwork is in meters square. So we've already gotten the center line for our blockwork, and now we've gotten the height of our blockwork. So you can now what? Measure. So to carry out the measurement, like I said before, you are going to be separating the 230 mm blockwork from the 150 mm blockwork because of procurement issues. The amount you pay for 230 mm blockwork, which is 9 inches block, is different from that you pay for 6 inches block, which is 150 mm blockwork. So you don't join them together, you have to measure them separately. So now the first thing is we're going to be measuring for the 230 mm blockwork. So to measure for the 230 mm blockwork, we've already calculated for our center line, and our center line for the 230 mm wall is 101,821 millimeters. If you convert that to meters, that's going to give you what? 101.82. So you will now what? Record 101.82. Then the next thing you're now going to record is the height, which we've calculated as what? 2,700, which is what? 2.70, and then you close. So doing this, you've measured for what? The area of your wall, in the sense that everything is closed. But you know that in your buildings there are openings. You have your openings for your windows, you have your openings for your doors, you have your openings for your lintels and other openings. So you have to adjust for them. As you measure this stuff like this, it means that everything is enclosed, like there's no opening. So now you have to what? Adjust for what? Openings. So now if you look at this drawing, the drawing here is quite complex because, like I said before, there are two kinds of blockwork: 230 mm blockwork and 150 mm blockwork. And what we just measured now is for what? 230 mm blockwork. So the adjustment you are going to be doing now will be the adjustment for all the openings that you see around the 230 mm blockwork. I don't know if that makes sense. So let's start with the adjustment for doors and windows that are found in the 230 mm blockwork. So to deduct the windows, the openings, we're going to be starting with the window openings. So like I said before, in your schedule, they are going to give you the amounts of the individual doors and windows that you have in your drawing, but you don't just deduct it like this, like that, in a situation where you have two different types of partition walls. So you have to deduct the 230 mm openings separate from the 150 mm openings. So you have to go and check your drawing to determine the number of each of the type of door and window openings that you have for the 230 mm wall. So as you can see, this is what we have in our schedule. I just brought it down so that we can easily get access to the information. So For window 1, we have 1500 by 1500, and they are 2 in number in the ground floor. For window 2, 1200 by 15, and they are 7 in number. Window 4, 900 by 1500, 2 in number. Window 5, 750 by 600, 2 in number. Window 6, 600 by 600, 3 in number. And as for the doors, door 2 is 1200 by 21, is 1 in number. Door 3 is 900 by 21, also 1 in number. And door 4, 900 by 21, and it is 4 in number. Then door 5, 750 by 21, and it is what? 5 in number. So now we're going to be checking our drawing to see how many numbers of these windows and doors do we have in the 230 mm block work. So I'm going to be starting with what? Window 1. So now we'll now count how many window ones do we have in the 230 mm wall. So like this is 230 mm, as you can see in the dimension. This is 1, right? This is another 230 mm block work. This is what? 2. So do we have any other one? No. So we have only what? 2 numbers of window 1 in our 230 mm block work. So now what? Right, 2 number. So now describe. The dimension is 1500 by what? 1500. So 1.50 by 1.50 multiplied by what? 2 number, and then we'll close. So we'll now go to what? Window 2. So for window 2, they said that they are 7 in number. So we'll now determine whether they are in wall 230 or whether they are in 150 mm wall. So we'll count. This is 1. This is 2. This is 3. This is 4. 5, 6, 7. Do we have any other one? No. So all the 7 number of window 2 that we have in our ground floor were all located at what? The 230 mm block wall. So now what? Record. So 7 in number, and then we now describe 1.20 by what? 1.50 multiplied by what? 7, and then you close. So the next one we're going to be looking at will be what? Window 4. So for window 4, we'll now count to look at how many window 4s we have on the 230 mm block work. So we'll start. This is 1, 2, 3. There are only 2 in number, so we'll record. So window 4 is 900 by 1500. So that's 0.90 by 1.50 multiplied by what? 2. So the next one will be what? Window 5. So on window 5, our schedule said that there are 2 in number. So we'll now count to see if they are located in the 230 mm wall. So we'll look for window 5. Okay, we have one here and we have another one here. So the 2 window 5s are located at the 230 mm wall. So we'll now what? Record 2 number, and then the dimension is what? 0.75 by 0.60 multiplied by 2, and then you close. So the last window we're going to be looking at is window 6. So we'll now look at our drawing to count how many window seats we have in the drawing. Our schedule said that there are 3 in number, so let's count if they are located in the 230 mm wall. 1, 2, 3. So there are 3 in number, all located at what? 230 mm wall. So now what? Record. So 600 by 600 is 0.60 by 0.60 multiplied by what? 3. And then we close. So the next thing we're going to be looking at will be the what? Doors. So the first door now is door 2. And our schedule said that there are 1 in number. So you can see this is the only door 2 we have, and it is inside the what? 230 mm board. So now what? Deduct it. And the size is 1200 by 2100. So 1.20 by 2.10. And then we close. So the next one we're going to be looking at is what? Door 3. Our schedule says that door 3 is 1 in number, so let's locate it if it is within 230 mm wall. And this is door 3, which is the exit door, and it is 1 in number, located in 230 mm Blockwork. So we will now record. So that's 0.90 by 2.10, and then we'll close. So the next one is what? Door 4. And we said that door 4 is what? 4 in number. So we'll now count to see if they are located within 230 mm wall. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4. Do we have any other one? No. So 4 in number. So we'll now what? Record. 0.90 by 2.10 multiplied by what? 4. And then we close. So the last door will be door 5. So door 5 in our schedule, they say that there are 5 in number. So we want to determine if all those 5 are located within the 230 mm wall. So we'll count. This is 1 within the 230 mm wall. This is 2. This is not passed because it is 150. This is not passed because it is 150. So this is 3. So 3 door 5 are located within the 230 mm wall, while 2 are in the 150 mm wall. So we'll be recording 3 numbers here. So the dimension is what? 750 by 21. That's 0.75 by 2.10 multiplied by what? 3. And then we close. So now doing this, we've recorded for all our door and window openings. So the next thing we're going to be looking at is to deduct for our lintel openings. Now, to deduct for our lintel openings, there are 2 types of, or there are 2 ways in which lintels can be constructed. We have the conventional way and we have the chain way. In our previous videos, we've already treated how to measure the conventional way, where you just add overhang to the openings. But in this method, I am going to be using, or I'm going to be assuming that the lintels are chained, meaning that the lintels goes round the building. So now if you look at this drawing here, you can see that we've already calculated for all our walls in this drawing, but the lintel is not going to be passing through every wall, especially the walls that have beams. For example, now if you look at this drawing here, we didn't calculate for this wall here because there is a beam here. However, we calculated for a blockwork here because, as you can see, there's an extra blockwork here, right? There's also an extra blockwork at this side, so we have to cater for that blockwork here. But it doesn't mean that lintel is going to cover here, because after the opening is the what? Beam. There's no lintel covering places like this. So what we're going to be doing now is that we're going to be minusing the lintel from what? The wall openings. And to do that now, all we need to do is to guess the total perimeter of the 230 mm wall, because remember we have 230 and we have 150 mm wall, so the lintels will have to separate them. So we are going to what? Get the total perimeter for the 230 mm wall, and then we'll multiply it by the what? Height of the lintel, which is what? 225 or 230 rather. So basically what we're going to be doing now is, since we've already determined the total length of all our what? Wall, we're just going to be minusing this side here, because this is the only side where the opening is enclosed by a beam, not a lintel. So we're going to be minusing what? This blockwork that we've already added for this entrance porch. So for the lintel, we're going to be determining the what? Total perimeter for the walls at which the lintel is going to cover. So all you need to do now is this: since we've already gotten the total perimeter of our wall to be 101,821, we'll bring this back here. So our center line is 101,821. So we're now going to be lessing what? We'll let these two walls at this side, which we've already calculated as what? 1,655. So we'll multiply it by 2 to minus it, because there will not be lintel passing through here. This place is enclosed by what? Beams. So now we'll now less what? 2 by 1,655, and that's going to give me what? 3,310. So when you minus that, what are you going to be having? You're going to be having 98,511. So we're also going to be minusing this one here, because it's going to be what? Enclosed by what? A beam, not a lintel. So basically how I knew that this is going to be enclosed by a beam, not a lintel, is because the opening is higher than that of the window. You know that your window, the height of your window is going to start from the height of your door, but these beam openings are higher, and after the height comes the beam. That is how I knew. So we'll now less this length of the wall, and we calculated it to be what? 4,840. So when you minus that, I'm going to be having what? 93,671. So 93,671 is the total perimeter of the lintels going around this building. So we'll now what? Record. We know that the thickness or the height of our lintel openings will be what? 230 mm. So we'll now what? Record 93.67 by what? 0.23. Remember, this is the deduction for the lintel we're trying to do, not the concrete. So now the next thing we're going to be deducting now would be the deduction for these openings here. So remember that in the beginning, when we're calculating for our walls, we calculated this, that these walls here are enclosed. So we have to what? Deduct for all these openings, which will give people access to the what? Entrance porch. So we'll name it as what other openings. So the other openings now will be starting with the what entrance opening. So now if you look at this is the length of the opening from here to here. That's from this point here to this point here, and they're giving it to us that the dimension is what 3,880. So we'll now record 3,880. That's 3.88, and the height would be what 2.70. And then we close. So the next opening now we're going to be looking at will be the openings at the side, which is this one, these two. And they told us the dimension from here to here is what 1,346, which is from here to here. So we'll record 1,346 will be what 1.35 by the height 2.70. So they are found in two sides, that's multiplied by 2, and then you close. So doing this, you've recorded for all your what openings in the what 230 mm blockwork. So what we're going to be doing now is that we're going to be getting the values in the squaring column. So basically, to interpret what we've done here, this 274.91 meters is the total square meters or the total area of the blockwork as if they were enclosed. So we're going to be deducting the individual openings, which are what we've calculated here for the windows and door areas. As you can see here, we'll minus it from that value. We'll also minus the lintel openings from that value, and we'll also minus other openings for that value. And when we minus this, we're going to be having what 197.12. So this is the actual what area of what blockwork we're going to be needing for our what 230 mm blocks. So this is what will be carrying to our what bill of quantity as the actual area of our what blockwork in meters squared. So the next one we're going to be looking at would be the 150 mm block. So we're going to be using the same approach for our 150 mm blocks. We've already calculated for the what total perimeter of our 150 mm block. So we'll be multiplying it by the height of the building, which we've already calculated, and then we're also going to be what deducting for what openings. So now we know that the total perimeter of our blockwork 150 mm, we've calculated it to be what 7,540 mm. So we will now record 7.54, and then so to get the height of the wall for the 150 mm blocks, we know that we've already gotten that the height of the wall is 2,700. So we're going to be minusing what lintels. Now the lintel is because of this door that we're having within this 150 mm blockwork. So lintel is going to be the thing covering the door. So we have to what remove it because lintel is concrete and we're looking for what block. So the height which we've gotten is what 2,700. So we're not going to less what the height of the lintel, which is what 230 or 225. So anyone you choose. So 2,700 minus 230 is going to give me what 2.47. So this is the height for our 150 mm blocks. So it's 2.47. You can also use the second approach where you determine the height of the blocks and then where you determine the area of the blocks without minusing any lintel. Then you now come here and less the area of the lintel. But this one is faster. Why is it faster? Let's look at this drawing first. So basically we know that from here to here is 2700, right? So now if we minus this lintel here, let's just say that this was a lintel. So if we minus this lintel, which they've told us that it is what, 230, right, it means that whatever we're going to be having left out from this 2700 will cater from this edge of the wall down to here, as well as the top side of the wall. So it's faster than getting the total area and then minusing the area for this lintel. So that's just what I did there. So after that, now we're not going to deduct for our openings. So to deduct for our openings, so what are the openings we have in our 150 mm wall? We have the first one is what, door 5, which is this. So we have a door 5 here. So it is only these two door 5 that we are going to be deducting. Remember, this window 6 is at the 230 mm wall, similarly to this window 6. So that is what we are looking for. We are looking for the openings at the 150 mm wall. So we'll not deduct door 5. And the parameters for door 5 is what, 750 by 21, so that's 0.75 by 2.10 multiplied by 2, because they are 2 in number. So we're not going to do the maths. So 7.54 times 2.47 is equal to 18.62. Then 0.75 times 2.10 times 2 is equal to 3.15. So when you minus this from this, we're going to be having 15.47. So 15.47 is the total area of our 150 mm blockwork. So now describe 150 mm blockwork as before described, and then we'll close. So doing this, we've measured for all our blocks in this drawing for our ground floor.